I never told my son about my $40,000 monthly income, even though he always saw me living a very simple and quiet life. One day he invited me to have dinner with his wife's parents, who were visiting from another country, and I decided to go along pretending to be a poor and innocent mother just to see how they would treat someone they thought had nothing. But the moment I walked into that restaurant, I knew this night would not end the way anyone expected, and what happened later shook my daughter-in-law and her family deeply, in a way they truly brought upon themselves. You see, my son Marcus, even at 35, never knew who his mother really was. To him, I was just the woman who left early for work, came home tired, cooked with whatever was in the kitchen, and lived like any ordinary office worker, and I never bothered to change that image. I never told him that I was making $40,000 every month, that I had spent nearly 20 years as a senior leader in a big international company, signing huge deals and making choices that affected many people. I didn't feel the need to show off because for me, respect and self-worth were never about money or titles. So I kept living in the same small apartment, used the same bag until it wore out, bought simple clothes, cooked at home, saved and invested quietly, and built my wealth without making any noise. I believed that real strength doesn't need to announce itself, it watches and waits, and that's exactly what I was doing when Marcus called me one Tuesday afternoon with a nervous voice and asked me to come to dinner to meet Simone's parents. And something in the way he spoke told me this was not just a normal invitation from a son to his mother. His voice didn't sound like a son inviting his mother. It sounded like someone asking me not to embarrass him, to blend in, to make everything look nice. When I calmly asked if they knew anything about me, there was a long pause before Marcus awkwardly admitted he had told them I worked in an office, lived alone, and was very simple, and that one word hit me harder than anything else, as if my whole life could be reduced to something small and unimportant. I agreed to come, hung up, and looked around my modest but cozy living room with its plain furniture and quiet walls. And that's when I decided that if everyone already thought I was poor, I would play that role perfectly and see how they treated someone they believed had nothing. On Saturday, I wore the worst clothes I owned, old shoes, no jewelry, carried a worn bag, tied my hair back carelessly, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who looked tired, forgettable, and exactly what they expected. The restaurant was in the most expensive part of the city, full of bright lights and well-dressed people, and during the ride I felt both nervous and sad, because part of me still hoped they would be kind even though I knew better. When I arrived, I saw Marcus and Simone waiting, both looking tense, and then I noticed her parents sitting like important guests, dressed in expensive clothes and covered in confidence as if they owned the place. As I walked toward them slowly, Marcus looked shocked and uncomfortable, Simone greeted me politely but without warmth, and even before a word was spoken, I could already feel that this evening was going to reveal exactly what kind of people they truly were. Simone introduced me to her parents in a strange, almost apologetic way, and the moment Veronica looked up at me, I could see the judgment written clearly on her face as her eyes slowly moved over my old dress, worn shoes, and simple bag. She shook my hand quickly and without warmth, and Franklin did the same, both giving me polite but empty smiles before I was left to sit at the far end of the table, as if that was the place for someone like me. No one pulled out my chair, no one asked if I was comfortable, and when the waiter brought the heavy menus, I pretended I couldn't understand them at all. Veronica offered to help with a fake smile and then ordered something simple and not too expensive for me, saying it in a way that made everyone uncomfortable but no one spoke up. Soon she began talking about their trip, their costly hotel, the expensive car, and the shopping they had done, carefully watching my face as if waiting for me to be impressed. Then she proudly explained how they owned property in several countries and managed big investments, before asking me what I did for a living in a sweet but clearly mocking tone. I replied that I worked in an office doing small, ordinary tasks, and after exchanging looks with her husband, she said it was honest work, though her voice made it sound like a favor to even say that. When the food arrived in fancy plates with tiny portions, she mentioned how much her meal cost and how quality was always worth paying for, and I simply nodded quietly, already understanding exactly what kind of evening this was going to be. Marcus tried to steer the conversation toward his work and some projects, but Veronica quickly cut him off and started asking about my life, whether I lived alone and if my small salary was enough to survive. She looked at me with fake sympathy and spoke as if I were someone to be pitied, and I answered quietly that I managed by saving and that I didn't need much. Then she gave a long dramatic speech about how brave women like me were, while also making it very clear that in her eyes I had not given my son the kind of life he deserved, and that was her way of reminding everyone at the table who she thought was better. She went on to explain how they had given Simone the best education, the best experiences, and how they had helped the young couple with their house and their honeymoon, before turning to me and asking if I had been able to help Marcus at all. I said I had given what I could, and she replied with a sweet but cutting smile that every little thing counts, even if it's small, and that was when I felt a calm, quiet anger start to grow inside me. I kept smiling and stayed silent while she continued talking about expensive wine and fine taste, clearly enjoying showing off, and when she asked if I drank wine, I said only on special occasions and usually the cheapest kind, which made her look at me with that same polite but superior expression, as if she had already decided exactly who I was. Veronica smiled in a way that sounded kind but wasn't, saying that not everyone develops a refined taste and that it usually comes from travel, education and experience, and then she and Franklin proudly talked about visiting famous places and learning about these things as a hobby. She praised Simone for having good taste like them, and then turned to me and asked what I liked to do in my free time, and when I answered that I enjoyed simple things like cooking, watching TV, or walking in the park, they exchanged another quiet, judging look. She said simple things were nice too, but added that people should always want more from life to see the world and grow, and then gently reminded me that not everyone gets those chances, which I calmly agreed with. When dessert came, she chose the most expensive one and talked about how special it was, even pointing out tiny decorations on top, while I ate mine quietly without saying a word. Then her tone suddenly changed and she said she wanted to talk about something serious as a family, and even though Marcus tried to stop her, she insisted and explained that while she respected me, Marcus and Simone now needed stability in their life. She made it very clear that they would keep helping them, but also hinted that Marcus shouldn't have extra responsibilities, and it was obvious she meant me. When I repeated the word, she explained in a soft but cutting way that because I lived alone and didn't earn much, it was natural for Marcus to worry about me, and she said it as if I were a problem that needed to be managed, not a mother who had given her whole life to her son. She said Marcus was a good son, but they didn't want his concern for me to affect his marriage, and I told her I understood perfectly, which seemed to please her. Then she and Franklin presented their idea, saying they could give me a small monthly amount to help me live a bit more comfortably so Marcus wouldn't have to worry, and in return they wanted me to give the couple more space and not be so present in their lives. It was clear they were trying to pay me to quietly step out of my son's life, and when Marcus protested, I stayed calm, wiped my lips, took a sip of water and let everyone wait for my answer. When I finally spoke, my voice was no longer shy or weak, and I asked how much they were offering, and when Veronica said around $500 or $700 a month, I repeated it plainly, making it sound exactly like what it was. Then I asked how much they had given for the house and the trip, and when she proudly listed the amounts, I calmly added them up and repeated her own words about loving your children. But then I asked her something that made the table go quiet, whether all that money had bought her real respect and real love, or just silence and control, and for the first time that night she stopped smiling as I pointed out that all evening she had only talked about prices, costs, and how much everything was worth. I told her that all evening she hadn't asked even once how I was doing, whether I was happy, lonely, or in need of company, and that instead she had only judged my value by money, and according to her, I was worth about $700 a month. When she tried to deny it, I stopped her and said clearly that from the moment I arrived, she had been measuring me with her wallet, and that people who only talk about money usually understand its true meaning the least. Franklin tried to defend her, but I asked him directly what her real intention had been: to pity me, to embarrass me, or to pay me to disappear, and he had no answer. I told Marcus not to stop me because I was done staying quiet, and when I leaned back and looked at Veronica without fear, she couldn't hold my eyes anymore. I reminded her that she had said she admired strong women and asked if she had ever truly struggled on her own or built anything without her husband's support, and when she talked about managing investments, I calmly pointed out that there is a big difference between managing what already exists and creating something from nothing. Then I told them that 40 years ago I was a young woman working for minimum pay, living in a rented room, eating the cheapest food completely alone, and that one day I found myself pregnant and the man responsible simply disappeared. And for the first time Marcus was hearing this part of my life. That I told them how my own family had turned their backs on me and how I had to choose between giving up or moving forward, and I chose to keep going no matter the cost. I worked until the very last days before Marcus was born and returned to my job just 2 weeks later, leaving him with a neighbor while I worked long, exhausting hours every single day. I didn't stay stuck in one role either. I studied late at night, took courses whenever I could, taught myself new skills, learned English at the public library, and slowly built knowledge that no one handed to me, all while raising a child alone and paying every bill by myself. Step by step, year after year, I climbed higher through sheer effort and discipline, and after 2 decades of non-stop work and sacrifice, I reached the top. Then I told them calmly that I earn $40,000 every month and have for many years, managing major operations across several countries, overseeing huge budgets and making decisions that affect thousands of people. The table fell silent as the truth sank in, and when Marcus asked why I had never told him, I explained that I wanted him to grow up valuing hard work, character, and independence rather than money. I said I live simply because I don't need to prove anything to anyone, and that true wealth doesn't need to be displayed. Finally, I looked directly at Veronica and explained that I dressed that way on purpose, that I pretended to have nothing so I could see how I would be treated. And what I saw that night revealed everything I needed to know, leaving her sitting there overwhelmed by the truth she never expected to face. They said it was impossible and that if I truly earned that much, Marcus would have known, and I calmly explained that he didn't know because I chose to live simply, never talked about my position, and preferred to save and invest instead of showing off with expensive things. Franklin tried to change the story by saying I had been rude and misunderstood them, but I looked straight at him and reminded him of every cold comment, every look of pity, and especially the moment they tried to offer me money so I would disappear from my son's life. When neither he nor Veronica could answer, I stood up and told them something they clearly had never learned, that money cannot buy good manners, kindness, or real character. Veronica stood up too, angry, accusing me of lying and making them look foolish, and I replied that they had done that all by themselves. I had only given them the chance to show who they really were. I told Simone gently that she hadn't known, but her parents knew exactly what they were doing, and that they only felt ashamed now because the woman they looked down on turned out to be stronger and more successful than they ever imagined. I reminded Veronica that I deserved respect not because of money or position, but because I am a human being and the mother of their son-in-law, something they had forgotten all evening. Then I made one last offer, telling her I would give her a huge amount of money if she could prove she had ever treated someone kindly without caring about their wealth. And when she couldn't answer, I showed her the difference between us. I took out my card, placed it on the table and told her to pay for dinner and leave a good tip, calling it a gift from the poor and naive mother, and when she saw my name and title on it, the last bit of that proud look finally disappeared from her face. For the first time I saw fear in Veronica's eyes. "I don't need your money," she said, her voice faltering. "I know," I replied calmly, "but I didn't need your pity either, yet that's all you offered all evening. Consider this gesture a lesson in courtesy, something you clearly never learned, despite all your European travels." Franklin slammed his hand on the table, demanding the scene stop, calling it disrespect, but I looked at him and asked where their respect had been all night. When Veronica suggested I was a burden, when she judged my salary, when she tried to buy me off. Franklin said she just wanted to help, and I corrected him. She wanted control, to erase the weak link in her perfect family, and she picked the wrong one. I turned to Simone, whose head was bowed and hands trembling. "Simone," I said softly. She looked up, tears running down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I stopped her. "No, you knew even if you didn't know about my money. You knew how your parents treat those they see as inferior, and you didn't stop them." She sobbed, saying she wanted to speak up but she feared her parents. I told her it was okay. Love isn't about control or money. It's about freedom and trust. Marcus stepped forward, voice breaking. "Mom, forgive me for assuming, for not asking, for thinking you were." I hugged him, telling him there was nothing to apologize for. I had done all of it for a reason. To raise him to value the right things, to be independent, and to learn empathy, the lessons money can't buy. He hugged me tightly, repeating his sorrow, and all the while Veronica remained frozen, rigid, confused, and quietly furious, witnessing the family she thought she controlled crumble under truth. Finally, Veronica spoke again, her voice tight. "This doesn't change anything. You lied. You deceived us. You came here with hidden intentions. You acted in bad faith." I nodded calmly. "That's true. I acted. I pretended to be something I'm not. Exactly what you do every day." Franklin demanded, "What is that supposed to mean?" I looked him in the eye. "It means you hide behind your money, your jewels, your trips, behind everything you can buy, but inside you are empty. No real conversations, no genuine interests, nothing to offer but a bank account." Veronica laughed bitterly. Coming from someone who lied all night, that's hypocrisy. Perhaps, I said, but my lie revealed the truth, your truth. And now you can't hide. I felt every insult disguised as advice, and I will never forget it. The waiter approached timidly, and Franklin dismissed him with a sharp hand. Veronica slumped in her chair, her posture no longer elegant but defeated, stripped of the power she thought she commanded. He tried again, softer, pleading. Era, I don't want this to ruin the relationship between our families. Marcus and Simone love each other. We can fix this. I cut her off firmly. Fix this? Too late. Now I know who you are and you know who I am. Truth cannot be erased with empty apologies or fake smiles. You treated me like trash and enjoyed it. Franklin tried to defend her, saying I provoked the situation. I nodded. Yes, I provoked this. I needed to see to confirm what I suspected. That money doesn't make you better, and you are the kind of people who look down on others who have less. Veronica wiped a tear. We are not bad people. Maybe not, I replied. But you are definitely not good, and there is a big difference. The waiter returned with the check and no one moved. Veronica glanced at my black platinum card still on the table, then looked up. I'm not going to use your card. We'll pay our own bill. Perfect, I said, and for the first time all night the tension lifted. Justice had been quietly, completely served, that I told her to keep the black card as a souvenir. A reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that the woman she scorned all night has far more than she could ever imagine, and not just in money. Veronica pushed the card away, saying she didn't want it or my moral lesson, but I returned it to her anyway, warning that someday she'd meet someone like me again and make the same mistake. Franklin, trying to save face, pulled out several gold cards and paid the check. But when the waiter returned, the first card was declined. Franklin turned red with disbelief. It happened again with the next card. Veronica looked horrified, muttering that this had never happened before, while Simone cried quietly and Marcus held my hand. I told Marcus he wasn't paying for anything and pulled out a different card from my old wallet. A heavy, transparent Centurion card, rare and exclusive, with unimaginable benefits. I placed it on the table and Veronica's eyes widened as she recognized it. The waiter carefully took it and returned minutes later, confirming the bill was settled. I didn't need the receipt. I gathered my wallet and tote, stood and looked at Veronica one last time, letting the silence speak everything I hadn't said in words. The lesson, the truth, and the quiet power she had underestimated all night. That I told them the dinner had been excellent and thanked them for the place, but also for showing me exactly who they were, because they had saved me years of wasted effort and many future disappointments. Veronica finally looked up, her eyes burning with anger, and warned that this wasn't over, that we were still family and would have to see each other again. I smiled and agreed, saying we would meet at birthdays and holidays, but now things were different because I knew what she truly thought, and she would always know that I knew, and that memory would never leave her. When Franklin returned and explained there was a temporary problem with their accounts, he realized I had already paid and thanked me in a broken voice, and I calmly replied that this is what family does, helps each other, especially when someone needs a small allowance, like the amount this dinner cost. Marcus asked to leave and I agreed. Then I turned to Simone, who was still crying, and told her gently that she wasn't responsible for her parents, but she was responsible. I asked Veronica one last thing before leaving. Do you remember when you said you speak 4 languages? She frowned. What does that have to do with anything? I smiled. Just curious, which of those languages taught you to be kind? Because clearly none of them did. She opened her mouth but no words came out. Exactly, I said. You can speak 100 languages and still have nothing worth saying. Then I stepped into the fresh night air, feeling it wash over me like a weight being lifted. Not a physical weight, but the burden of pretending, of staying silent, of tolerating disrespect. Marcus walked beside me, worried. Mom, are you okay? I smiled. Better than ever. And you? He sighed. I'm processing everything. I can't believe you never told me about your job, your money, everything you've accomplished. I stopped and looked him in the eyes. Does it bother you? He shook his head quickly. No, I'm proud. But I also feel foolish, blind. I took his hand. You're not foolish. You simply saw what I wanted you to see. I needed you to grow up independent, to work hard, to value what you achieve on your own. That was more important than money. He nodded, understanding, and added softly that now he saw why I had always seemed calm and self-sufficient. I smiled. I needed many things, son, but none could be bought. I needed to see you grow into a good man, make wise choices, and I did. He whispered, even marrying Simone? I smiled gently. Even marrying Simone. She isn't her parents. She can learn, she can change. That depends on both of you, on the values you choose to follow. A taxi arrived and I opened the door. Marcus stopped me. Mom, can I ask something? Why did you pretend to be poor? Why not tell them the truth from the start? I turned to him, needing him to understand. As I had to see. I had to confirm my suspicions about Simone's family, to know if they were truly as I imagined. And I was right. He lowered his gaze. I'm sorry. I shook my head gently. You don't apologize for them. But you do need to decide what kind of husband, what kind of father you want to be someday. Marcus looked at me confused. What do you mean? I smiled softly. You've just seen two very different ways of handling money and power, your in-laws' way and mine. They use it to control, to humiliate, to feel superior. I use it to live freely, to help quietly, to live with peace. Which path you follow is up to you. He nodded slowly, absorbing it. I opened the taxi door and slid in, rolling down the window. Mom, one last question, he said. Will you ever forgive Veronica and Franklin? I thought for a moment. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, nor does it mean letting it happen again. Maybe I'll forgive them someday if I see real change. If they start treating people like people, not numbers. Until then, I'll be polite, distant, and cautious. He hesitated, then asked, and me? Do you forgive me for not asking, for assuming, for letting this dinner happen? I looked at him with tenderness. Son, there's nothing to forgive. You acted with love and care. What happened afterward was not your fault. It was theirs and a little mine for choosing to play their game. He smiled weakly. You won. I won. I shook my head. I don't feel victorious. I feel tired and sad because I confirmed something I didn't want to. Some people never change, some families are broken even with money, and no bank account can fill certain voids. The taxi driver cleared his throat. Ma'am, shall we go? Yes, give me a second, I said. I turned to Marcus one last time. Go to Simone. Talk to her. Support her. Be honest about tonight, about your expectations, and set boundaries. Otherwise, this will repeat itself. I will, he promised. I love you, Mom. And I mean it more now than ever because I finally see who you really are, and you are incredible. I smiled. I love you too, son. Always have, always will. Love has no price, and that's a lesson Veronica and Franklin will never learn. I signaled the driver and the taxi started moving. Out the window, I watched Marcus head back toward the restaurant, shoulders slumped, thoughtful, likely ready to face Simone and her parents, to have those difficult conversations. And I felt proud because he was learning, maturing, choosing to be better than the example he had just witnessed. The city lights blurred past as I closed my eyes, letting the weight of the night lift and reflecting on every word, every look, every tense, unforgettable moment that I wondered if I had been too harsh, too cruel, too vengeful. But then I remembered every disguised insult, every condescending comment, every look of disdain, and I realized I hadn't done anything wrong. I had simply been honest. The taxi moved through the quiet streets, city lights flashing past the window. I opened my worn canvas tote and checked my phone. Simple, unassuming like me. 3 messages. One from my assistant about Monday, one from a colleague congratulating me on a closed deal, and one from an unknown number. I opened it. It was from Simone. Mother-in-law, please forgive me. I didn't know my parents would act like that. I am ashamed. I need to talk to you, please. I stared at it for a long moment and chose not to respond. She needed time. Real understanding and change require reflection, not rushed words. I set the phone aside. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Excuse me, ma'am, is everything okay? You got in very quietly. Most people leaving that restaurant are happy, talking about how good the dinner was. You look like you just went through a war. I smiled faintly. Something like that. Was it that obvious? He shrugged. I've been driving a cab for 20 years. I've seen it all. Drunks, couples fighting, families arguing. But you have the look of someone who just said what they've been holding inside for years. I nodded. You're perceptive. It's my job, he said with a smile. It also passes the time. Do you want to talk about it? You don't have to, but sometimes it helps to tell a stranger. Someone who won't judge, someone who doesn't know you. I shook my head. Thank you, but I think I've talked enough for today. He nodded knowingly. I understand. But let me tell you, whatever happened in there, you did the right thing. You are calm. You're not crying or screaming. You are processing. That means you spoke your truth. And the truth always brings peace, even if it hurts. I studied him. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and hands worn from work. A simple man like the one I had pretended to be tonight. Do you believe in the truth? I asked. He looked me in the eye. I believe in honesty, he said. Not always the absolute truth, because that changes depending on who tells it. But honesty is saying what you feel without masks, without lies, even if it hurts, even if it makes things awkward, even if it costs you something. I nodded slowly. You're right. And for the first time since the dinner, I felt it, the quiet, steady relief of having spoken my truth. My wife always said I was too blunt, that I spoke without thinking and sometimes hurt people without meaning to. Maybe she was right, he admitted, but she also told me she never doubted me because she knew I was always genuine, honest, and unpretentious. I smiled. He sounds like a remarkable woman. She was, he said softly. She passed away 5 years ago. I felt a pang of sympathy. I'm sorry, I said quietly. He shook his head, a small smile on his lips. Don't be sorry. We shared 40 years together. 40 years filled with honesty, arguments, forgiveness, laughter, tears, and every emotion in between. Never once did I go to bed wondering what she really thought, because we always said it plainly to each other. That's a rare gift. You're right, I murmured, it truly is. The taxi stopped at a red light and he leaned slightly forward. May I ask you something personal? Go ahead. Are you rich? His question startled me, not because of the topic but because of the way he asked it, so straightforward. I raised an eyebrow. Why do you ask? He studied me carefully. I picked you up from a restaurant that costs a fortune per person, yet you dress simply, carry an old bag, wear worn shoes. But you speak and carry yourself like a seasoned executive. And you just paid for my ride with crisp bills from a wallet that looks decades old. I couldn't help but chuckle. Observant, I commented. Part of the job, he said with a grin. So am I rich? I considered it. It depends on how you measure richness, I said. If you mean money, yes, I have more than enough. But if you mean happiness, I also have health, a loving son, and work I'm passionate about. That, to me, makes me rich in ways money alone can't buy. He nodded, clearly satisfied, and I knew he understood. Truly wealthy people don't need to flaunt it. The light turned green and the taxi moved again. What happened at the restaurant? He asked, curiosity in his voice. I told him I pretended to be poor to see how they would treat me. He laughed out loud. That's brilliant. And how did they behave? I said calmly, without anger. They treated me terribly, humiliated me, spoke down to me, and acted as if I were invisible. His laughter faded. I winced slightly. That must have stung, he said. It did, I admitted, but it also confirmed something important. I was right about them. They didn't deserve my respect, my time, or my concern. And now they knew who I truly am. He whistled softly. That sounds epic. I said with a small smile. Definitely. We pulled up in front of my building, an older, middle-class apartment block. Nothing fancy but comfortable, safe, and homey. The driver looked at it in surprise. You live here? He asked. I nodded. Yes, this is home. He shook his head. You're special. Most people with money move into luxury towers with doormen, gyms, and pools. You live like an ordinary person. I am ordinary, I said. I just happen to have more money than most. That doesn't make me different, better, or more important. Money is a tool, not a measure of character. He smiled thoughtfully. I wish more people thought that way. The world would be a better place. That I pulled out my wallet. How much is it? I asked. $30, he replied. I handed him 100. Keep the change, ma'am. He hesitated. This is too much. It's not, I said gently. You listened to me tonight. You reminded me that good people still exist. That perspective, that honesty, that's worth far more than $70. He took the bill carefully, almost reverently. Thank you. Truly thank you, he said. And take care of that honesty, I told him. It's rare. It's valuable. Don't lose it. I won't, he promised. I stepped out of the taxi and closed the door. He rolled down his window one last time. Ma'am, one more thing, he said. Whatever happened tonight, don't regret it. Don't feel sorry. People like you, people who speak the truth even when it hurts, are the ones who change the world. Slowly, one conversation at a time. I smiled. Thank you. I'll remember that. The taxi drove off, leaving me standing in front of my building. I looked up at my fifth-floor window, dark and silent, waiting. I entered, walked up the stairs, always avoiding the elevator, and reached my door. I used the same keys I'd had for 15 years. Inside, the apartment was quiet, cool, and empty. I flipped on the light. Everything was as it should be. A simple living room, a small kitchen, a modest dining area with mismatched chairs, bare walls. And I felt a deep, lasting peace. This space was mine. No pretense, no show, no need to impress anyone. Just me exactly as I was. I kicked off my worn shoes, swapped my wrinkled gray dress for soft, familiar pajamas, and made myself a cup of tea. I sat on the sofa, switched on the television, and turned it off almost immediately. Nothing mattered out there. I simply sat, thinking, feeling, and for the first time in years I felt completely free. Free from pretending, from hiding, from tolerating judgment, from being less than I truly was. That night, I hadn't just exposed Veronica and Franklin. I had freed myself from expectation, from shame, from the weight of needing approval. That liberation was priceless, far more valuable than any bank balance. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "Mom, did you get home safely?" I smiled and replied quickly, "Yes, son. I'm home resting. All is well." His answer came almost immediately. "I love you. Thank you for everything, for being who you are, for teaching me, for never giving up." A tear slipped down my cheek, not of sadness but of relief, of love, of gratitude. I typed back, "I love you too. Always." I set my phone aside, sipped my tea, and looked around my modest apartment. My sanctuary, my truth. And I smiled. Money didn't matter. Prestige didn't matter. The career titles, the promotions, the wealth, they were all secondary. What mattered was this moment. Peace, honesty, and knowing I had lived true to myself. The next morning I woke early as always. 40 years of discipline had trained me to rise with the sun. Even on a day off, my body refused to linger in bed. I brewed strong, black coffee and settled by the window with a steaming mug, watching the city wake. Street vendors set up their stalls, pedestrians moved with purpose, and life went on, indifferent to personal dramas. My phone rang. The number was familiar and I felt a quiet anticipation stir inside me. "Marcus," I answered. "Good morning, son," I said, hearing the weariness in his voice. "Mom, I need to talk to you." "Did something happen?" I asked. "A lot," he replied. "Last night Simone and I had a long, intense conversation. Her parents were there too, and it was overwhelming." I took a sip of coffee and urged him to continue. Marcus sighed deeply. "After you left, I went back to the restaurant. Veronica and Franklin were still stuck there waiting for their cards to work. It was humiliating for them. Simone was in tears, devastated, and I was furious, more than I've been in years." I listened quietly as he went on. "I told them everything, all I felt during that dinner. I told them I was ashamed of them, that they treated you like you didn't matter, that their behavior was unacceptable, and that I would never tolerate it again." I asked what they said. At first, Veronica tried to defend herself, saying they just wanted to protect Simone, to make sure I had a stable family, that they didn't mean any harm. Franklin said I was overreacting, that it had been a normal dinner, and your response was out of proportion. I squeezed my coffee mug in frustration. Typical, I thought. Marcus continued, his voice cracking slightly. Then Simone spoke. She told them they were wrong, that they had been cruel, that she saw every comment, every look, every disguised insult, and that she was ashamed to be their daughter in that moment. I smiled faintly. Good. That means she's waking up. Marcus chuckled dryly. Veronica completely lost it. She yelled at Simone, called her ungrateful, claimed they had sacrificed everything for her, that they gave her the best life and she had no right to judge them. Franklin supported her, accusing us of being manipulated by you, saying you planned everything to make them look bad. I let out a quiet laugh. "Of course it's all my fault," I murmured. Marcus agreed. I told them yes, you planned something, but the truth is they fell into the trap themselves because that's really how they treat people they consider beneath them. You just gave them the chance to show it and they did perfectly. I nodded. "Well said. I learned it from you." Silence followed, then Marcus continued. Mom, I need you to know something. Last night, Simone and I decided to set boundaries with her parents. We're not cutting ties, but there will be rules. No comments about money, no comparisons, no attempts to control our lives. If they can't respect that, they'll face the consequences. I asked if they accepted. No, he said. They left furious, claiming we were ungrateful, that we'd regret it, that they wouldn't help us when we needed it. Franklin even said he might reconsider his will. Veronica said Simone had chosen the wrong family. Emotional blackmail, the last resort of those without real arguments. I nodded. Exactly. But it didn't work, he said. Simone stood firm. I stood firm. They left without saying goodbye, without looking back. And honestly, Mom, I felt relieved, as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. That's because it was, I told him. You lifted the weight of living under their expectations and control. Now you can build your life on your terms, not theirs. Marcus's voice softened with emotion. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for what you did last night. I know it wasn't easy, awkward even, but we needed to see it. I needed to see who they really are, and Simone needed to see there's another way to live. An honest, authentic way. You're welcome, son. I only did what I felt was right, I replied. Marcus hesitated, then added, there's something else. Simone wants to come see you. She wants to apologize in person, not just as a daughter-in-law trying to look good, but as someone genuinely trying to learn. I thought for a moment. Tell her she can come, but not today. Give her a few days to reflect, to think carefully about what she wants to say. Rushed apologies are empty. Thoughtful ones have meaning. I'll tell her, Marcus promised. Mom, one more thing. How are you after all this? How do you feel? I looked out the window as the sun rose fully, bathing the city in light. I'm well, I said. Better than well. I'm at peace because I finally said everything I needed to say, and I don't regret a thing. Marcus's voice softened. I'm glad to hear that. I love you. I love you too. Rest now. I'll see you soon. After we hung up, I finished my coffee and decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Walk without purpose, just wandering and thinking. I dressed comfortably, old jeans, a simple top, worn sneakers, grabbed my keys and stepped outside. The streets were alive, families strolling, children laughing, couples holding hands, vendors calling out the morning's fresh bread. I wandered through the nearby park and sat on a bench watching people move by. Most of them probably didn't have much money, working hard day after day, living with just enough. Yet they smiled, hugged, and savored the simple moments. I thought about Veronica and Franklin with all their wealth, their properties, trips, and jewels. Were they truly happy, or were they just busy proving themselves, trying to fill a void with things that could never buy value, respect, or love? An older woman sat beside me. Good morning, she said warmly. Good morning, I replied. Beautiful day, isn't it? She smiled. Very beautiful, I nodded. She took bread from her bag and began feeding the pigeons. I come here every Sunday, she said, her eyes bright with calm contentment. It's my moment of peace before the week gets hectic again, she said. I understand, I replied. I need a moment of peace too. She studied me for a moment. Difficult week? She asked. Something like that, I said. More like a difficult night, she nodded knowingly. Sometimes one night can change everything. I murmured my agreement. Can I give you some unsolicited advice? She asked. Go ahead, I said, smiling. She pointed to the pigeons pecking at the bread. Look at them. Big, small, pretty feathers, scruffy feathers. They all share the same food, the same space, and none thinks it's better than the others. That's a nice metaphor, I said. It's not a metaphor, she replied. It's the truth. Humans are the only animals that invent hierarchies and measure value by possessions, looks, or status. Pigeons don't do that, they just live. We could learn from them. I laughed softly. Completely right. I should give some lessons to a few people I know. She chuckled. Oh child, at my age I don't give lessons. I just observe and share what I see, though most people don't listen. They're too busy running, buying, competing, forgetting that in the end we all end up the same. With or without money, jewels, or property, we all turn to dust. How philosophical, I commented. Realistic, she corrected. I've lived 82 years. The most miserable people I met were the ones with the most, because it was never enough. They always wanted more, compared themselves, competed, and died without truly living, loving, or being. Her words sank deep. "Thank you for sharing that," I said. She patted my hand. "You're welcome, child. Remember, it doesn't matter how much you have. What matters is how you treat others. That is what lasts, what transcends, the only inheritance worth leaving." She stood, packed her empty bag, and waved. "Have a beautiful Sunday." "You too," I replied, watching her go. A small, frail woman in worn clothes and shoes, but with more wisdom than all the Veronicas and Franklins combined. I stayed on the bench longer, thinking, feeling, processing, and came to a clear conclusion. I didn't regret a single word or action from the night before. Everything I did was necessary, honest, and liberating. Honesty, even when it hurts, is always the right path. 3 days passed before Simone knocked at my door. 3 quiet days of reflection and processing. When I heard the bell ring that Wednesday afternoon, I knew exactly who it was. I opened the door. She stood at my door looking nothing like the polished woman from the restaurant. No makeup, her hair tied back simply, wearing jeans and a plain shirt, no jewelry or fancy shoes, just quiet and nervous, and for the first time she looked real and unguarded. She asked softly if she could come in, and I stepped aside to let her enter. She walked in slowly, looking around at my small apartment, the modest furniture, the plain walls, as if seeing my world for the first time. When she sat, I waited without pushing her, giving her space to speak. Finally, she said she didn't know where to begin, and I told her to start wherever she felt ready. She took a deep breath and said she hadn't come only to say sorry, but also to explain herself and her parents. She told me how they grew up very poor in a small town, without comfort, without security, working from childhood, watching people get sick and die because there was no money for help, and how that fear stayed with them forever. They worked endlessly, saved everything, moved to a new country, and built their life from nothing. And to them, money became the symbol of safety, of never going back to that painful past. I told her I understood, because pain can shape people in harsh ways, but she quickly said that still didn't excuse how they treated me. With shaking voice, she admitted she had seen every cold look and heard every hurtful comment, but had stayed quiet because she was raised to believe that disagreeing with them meant being ungrateful and disloyal. Now she said she finally understood that love is not control, that family is not blind obedience, and that you can love people without letting them rule your life. She said Marcus and I had helped her see that, and that night at the restaurant felt like something had been lifted from her eyes. Wiping her tears, she admitted she had always felt something was wrong but kept telling herself she was just too sensitive, until that evening showed her the truth clearly at last. Simone looked at me with earnest eyes, and I could see she was really listening now. She said she had realized there is another way to live. A life where money doesn't measure your worth, where humility is strength and being authentic is true wealth. I took a sip of water and told her that I hadn't gone to the restaurant to change her, but to protect myself and to understand who I was dealing with. She nodded and thanked me, saying that my honesty had saved her too, showing her she didn't have to become like her mother, or teach her future children to value people by their possessions. I asked how her parents were handling it, and she sighed. Veronica hadn't spoken to her in 3 days, and Franklin had sent a message calling her choices disappointing, accusing her of favoring strangers over family and warning she would regret it. Yet Simone said she didn't feel guilty, she felt free. I told her that meant she had made the right decision. She explained that she and Marcus had set clear boundaries. Her parents could be part of their lives only if they respected their decisions and stopped trying to control them through money or guilt. Otherwise, the relationship would remain distant. I asked how her parents had reacted. Badly, she admitted. Veronica called them ungrateful. Franklin threatened to cut off financial support, treating their love as if it depended on money alone. Simone looked at me, and I could see her understanding that her parents truly equated value with wealth, blind to happiness, peace, or real connections, obsessed with accumulation and status. After a pause, she asked something that made my heart soften. She wanted to learn from me, to know how to live with dignity, to be strong without cruelty, to be rich in life without needing to show it. I smiled and told her I couldn't give her all the answers. That comes from living, making mistakes, falling and rising again. But I could share my experience and assure her that staying true to her values would bring peace, and that peace is worth more than any fortune. She looked determined, saying she wanted to try, not just for Marcus but for herself, to live free of pressure, to stop needing to impress, to stop fearing she wasn't enough. I told her then to do it, but not all at once. Step by step, learning, growing, and finding her own strength along the way. I told Simone to take it slow, to make changes little by little, starting by questioning her habits, her purchases, and her motivations. Before every decision, I said, ask yourself, is this for me or for others? Does this bring me peace or just appearance? She nodded, listening closely, taking it all in. Then she asked about her parents, whether they could ever change. I answered honestly, I didn't know. Change is only possible if someone sees the problem and they truly believe the world is at fault, that people are ungrateful, that they are victims. But she, Simone, could change. She promised she would, with Marcus' support and maybe with my example as a guide. I told her she didn't need me, she just needed to listen to that inner voice she had silenced for years to please her parents. She wiped away the last of her tears and thanked me for my honesty, patience, and for not giving up on her family. I smiled and told her there was nothing to thank me for, only one request. When she had children, teach them to value people, not possessions. To practice empathy, humility, and kindness. Things that cost nothing but are worth everything. She promised wholeheartedly, and we shared a real warm hug, no masks, just connection. She left an hour later, lighter, freer, hope in her eyes. I sat back on my sofa looking around my simple apartment and smiled. This was enough. Real, honest, authentic life filled with genuine relationships. I didn't need more. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, thanking me for welcoming Simone, listening to her, and giving her a chance, expressing his love in words too big for messages. I replied simply, I love you too, son. Always. I sat by the window watching the sunset turn the sky orange and pink, realizing a fundamental truth. Real wealth isn't money. It's peace, genuine connections, pride in yourself, and love you can feel deeply. Veronica and Franklin could have millions, but I had tranquility, authenticity, and the pure love of my son, and that made me richer than anyone. I never pretended to be poor again, I didn't need to. I had learned, I had seen, I had liberated myself. They remained who they were, rich in money, poor in spirit, but that was no longer my concern. I had spoken my truth, set my boundaries, and protected my peace. For the first time in years, I didn't have to pretend. I was simply a mother, an executive, a woman, a survivor, a fighter, rich in every way that mattered. And that was more than enough. That was everything.